Over the last couple of years, the fuzzy dice style bait, which is basically a ball of plastic with a lot of different silicone strands coming out of them, have become a huge trend in bass fishing. Now, at first, I really thought these things were kind of a gimmick, but then we started to see a lot of anglers, specifically a lot of Japanese anglers, have a lot of success with these baits on huge tournament trails. Now, recently, I got to fish with an angler. He told me something pretty interesting about these baits, and it also made a lot of sense with some of the studies that I've been reading here lately. So in this video, I really want to talk to you about why these baits are so effective, why a lot of Japanese anglers are so secretive about their lures, and a couple of studies that back up all this information to help you become a better angler. So stay tuned. It's going to be a good one. Now, this video is brought to you by Fin Fishing Apparel. Right now, for the month of August, for every dollar that is spent over at Fin Fishing, it's an entry to win one of 8 different prizes that we're going to be giving away at the end of the month, which include 7 different bait cast rods and 1 brand new bait cast reel by ARC. Also, every single order that goes out the door in the month of August is going to be getting a free mystery lure. And for the month of August, if you buy one of the USA made sun shirts, one of the only sun shirts made in the US, you will actually get a free Bassmass net gator with it. Now, you can also get into the contest for absolutely free without any purchase necessary by simply signing up for the newsletter. But shopping at Fin Fishing is truly the best way to help support the Bass Fishing HQ channel. I greatly appreciate all of you who have done so in the past. Now, if you are an angler like me, you probably like to know the why behind things. Why are bass where they are? Why are they eating what they are eating? And when I looked at the fuzzy dice for the last couple of years, I really just didn't understand this bait. Why would a bass eat something that looks like this? Now, bass are an opportunistic feeder, so they really won't say no to anything, and I kind of just thought the fuzzy dice was something they just weren't saying no to. But after fishing with an angler here recently, I realized that there might be a little bit deeper reason why bass are so attracted to a fuzzy dice style bait. Now, when I was fishing with this angler, he happened to mention to me that a fuzzy dice looks a lot like the zooplankton, the freshwater zooplankton that is in our water. So when I got home that day, I started doing a little bit of research, and lo and behold, the fuzzy dice actually does look like a lot of zooplankton. Now, the biggest difference is that a fuzzy dice is really big, and zooplankton you can't even see with your eye. But when bass are teeny tiny, like when they are fresh out of the egg and they are a ½ inch long, zooplankton is one of their primary ways of getting big and surviving and eating. So the truth is that bass are more or less used to eating something like this. I'm not saying that they necessarily remember what zooplankton looks like, but more or less they've been programmed to eat something that looks just like this. The other thing, bass simply have not seen a lot of these baits. And when I was thinking about some of the Japanese anglers and how secretive they are with some of their baits, as well as a few different studies that I have read here recently, everything started making a little bit of sense. So what I want to do with the rest of this video is tell you about a lure avoidance study that was done a few years ago and tell you how it kind of relates all back to this fuzzy dice. Now, in this study, researchers wanted to see how bass avoid being captured by anglers, and they wanted to see if bass could learn from each other. Now, the researchers wanted to use naive bass for this study, basically meaning they wanted to use bass that had never been caught on a lure before, not even seen a lure. So the first thing that they did was they got 312 bass and they put tags on all these fish. That way they knew exactly what fish was being caught throughout the study. And they basically separated these fish into 2 main groups of bass. You had observer bass, and you also had demonstrator bass. Now, there was 160 different demonstrator bass, and they basically stocked all of these fish into 4 different ponds. They put 40 different bass in each pond. Now, the other 152 observer bass, they stocked into 1 large pond. Now, the first part of the study was called the exposure phase. Now, as you might think, this is the part where the bass are going to be exposed to angling pressure and being exposed to different lures. Now, they wanted to do this on just 2 of the demonstrator ponds. So what they did for 12 days, they had 2 anglers come in and fish these ponds with a good old watermelon wacky rigged Senko every single day for 12 days. Now, obviously, they recorded how many times a fish was caught, as well as the exact fish that were caught. Now, as you probably think, the catch rates were really high at first, but as more and more bass were getting caught, and not only getting caught, but getting caught multiple times, these fish started to recognize that bait, and they started to learn that bait, and the catch rates significantly dropped over the course of the 12 days. Now, after the 12 days were done, they decided to do what they called their social learning phase. So basically what they did, they took those other 152 bass, the observer bass, and they stocked them evenly into the 4 ponds that had all the demonstrator bass. So they put 38 new bass into each pond. Now, during the social learning phase, all 4 of these ponds were fished, but they were really looking at the observer fish. Would these new bass have different reactions in ponds where bass had already been caught and in the ponds where no bass had still ever seen a lure? Because obviously the bass that had already seen that lure, had already been caught on that lure, had a very negative experience. And in those ponds, those fish that had already been there maybe see that lure and go away. And so are those new observer bass doing the exact same thing? Are they socially learning from each other? So after the 4 days of fishing, they found that in both of these ponds, the catch rates of the observer bass was roughly the exact same, which basically means that the observer bass did not learn from the negative reactions from the bass that had already been caught. Now, the third and final part of the study is called the lure switch phase. Now, during this part of the study, as you might think, they switched up their baits. The first thing that they did in this part of the phase was they decided to use a white colored Senko instead of a watermelon colored Senko. So they used the exact same bait and rigged it the exact same way on the exact same tackle, but they simply used a different color bait. Now, they fished this bait for a few days, and what I found that was super interesting is that you didn't see a spike at all in the catch rates. As a matter of fact, the catch rates remained really low even when they switched up the color. And the researchers basically concluded that the similarity in lure, the way that it fell in the water, the way that the anglers worked them, was the reason that the bass were not biting it. Now, one of the reasons as an angler that I found this interesting is that you do hear a lot of people talk about colors at times. They talk all about, hey, it's got to be this color, it's got to be that color. But what we see from this study is that sometimes it's not about the color at all. And as a matter of fact, it's really about the action of the bait that we're using, which actually brings me to the very last part of this study. Now, during the lure switch phase, they first did the white Senko, like we just talked about. The second kind of part of this phase, they actually switched lures completely to a inline spinner. So they went from baits that were very subtle and very natural in action to a bait that has a very aggressive flash and a lot more vibration. And guess what? The bass actually responded way more positively to that lure. As a matter of fact, the catch rates spiked. They actually equaled the exact same catch rates that the bass originally had on that Senko. And it remained like that for a few days, and then it started to drop again. Now, for me, as a tournament angler, I have always believed that it's important to rotate through a number of baits, especially when you are fishing on areas, for example, like an offshore school. Maybe you find a school where there is 20 or 30 bass, and presenting those different fish with different baits can help you to really maximize that area. But if you are like me, you've probably fished around schools of 20, 30, 40 bass, and you catch maybe 5 or 6 fish, and then it just seems like that whole school completely shuts down no matter what bait that you're throwing. But if you think about all the pressure that these lakes receive these days and how a lot of people know the same schools of bass, they know the same offshore hotspots, they know the same shallow water hotspots, it may not just be me rotating baits through these fish. There may be 4, 5, 6 different other boats that are all throwing a variety of different baits. And when you have a group of 30 or 40 bass that have been hit 5 times in the same day, and each angler has showed that fish 3 or 4 different baits, they see a lot of our more traditional baits, deep diving crankbaits, big swim baits, Carolina rigs, jigs, big spoons. And sure, you may be able to get the aggressive ones, but what about those fish that are a little bit more neutral? Maybe the ones that have received a lot of pressure. To me, that's where it all goes back to baits like the fuzzy dice. A fuzzy dice or some of these other Japanese lures, they have not seen them. The bass have not seen these baits. And so therefore, when they are presented with something that they have never seen, especially a bait like the fuzzy dice that might instinctually attract them because of what they did when they were a bass fry, what they ate on when they were a bass fry, it can really get some of those neutral fish to start eating, to start biting. And so when you think really hard about it as to why a lot of these Japanese anglers are very secretive of the baits that they are fishing, the rigs that they are fishing, I think it really all comes down to fishing pressure and being able to present a bass with something that is just completely different, something that really they have never seen before. Because if you present bass sometimes with a bait they have never seen, we see in the studies that they may go back to really feeding just as heavily, just like they've never seen a lure in the past. Now, on a final note, the one thing that I've also noticed that a lot of Japanese anglers are very critical about is scent on their baits. And I actually did a full video all about a bass's sense of smell. I actually reviewed a different study that showed you just how strong it is. And I'm gonna leave that linked right up here in the corner. So if you guys enjoyed this video, I think you will like this one. Also, don't forget to check out that fin fishing gear, and I will see you guys in the next one.